Good evening. How's everybody?
Good. How are you?
Good. You have a good trip up north?
I did. It was wonderful.
A little cool this time of year up there.
Yeah, aside from that. But yeah, it snowed and then the next day it was sunny. So I think it's like that everywhere now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you got to go. Your daughter doing well?
Yes, she is. She's doing really good, which makes me happy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's good. Um, what's she majoring in?
Aerospace engineering. She wants to go on the Mars mission.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Good for
So
her.
I need to get used to not seeing her a lot, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. No, that's a worthy goal, I can tell you. I'd like to see us return back to where we respected and revered and promoted science again. I think that'd be a good thing. And intelligence.
Yes.
I think that would be neato. All right, what time is it? It's about time to get started. We've got 18. I think everybody's here is going to be here. Good evening. Welcome to Mels 603. This is week 10. It's actually week 11, but it's class number 10. I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. We'll start as we normally do. Welcome, Dr. Hallman. We will look at our weekly schedule to see where we are. Here we go. So this is week 11, class 10. This is personnel night. We'll talk about personnel. I'm going to lean very heavily on our two principal experts tonight. As we talk about personnel, we had our discussion board this week interview an administrator concerning HR practices and interview an administrator concerning employee assistance, compensation plans, and benefits. And briefly on those, I want to make sure that I responded. I think about everybody has answered those questions, and then we'll talk about facilities in a minute. On HR practices, every district, not just private schools and charter schools, but every district is different in their procedure. I worked in 4 districts during my career. The larger districts did more of the things for you. Charlotte Mecklenburg, most specifically, did everything. They advertised, found the people, did the background checks, did the curriculum vitas, did everything. They vetted them, and when they sent applicants, when your HR analyst sent an applicant out to you, all you had to do was interview and pick the one you wanted. That was it. I also worked in 2 smaller rural districts where you had to do everything. You had to advertise, you had to do the background checks, you had to call the references, you had to do everything. And so the notion here is this: you better, whatever district that you administrate in, you have to find out what the process is, and you have to follow it exactly, because it's a due process issue. The district lays out the substance or substantive due process, but you are expected to follow the procedure. You can't get the cart before the horse or tell somebody or offer somebody a job if that's not part of it. You have to know exactly. If you have to do reference checks, you better do them. If that's not part of what you do, you better not do them. And so the notion here is, I can't just put out a document that says, here are the steps to hiring somebody, because it's different everywhere. You need to know what the process is, what the substance of the process is in your district, and make sure you follow it exactly. Exactly. Now, a caveat to that is, once you hire people, there's different benefits packages, compensation packages. It varies from public school to private school to charter school. You better find that out as well. Not so much that you should be giving people advice, but know what your district offers. But more importantly, know to who to refer them to in your HR department when they have questions about their compensations, about their insurance, about their benefits, about employee assistance. You should be able to answer some general things, but more importantly, you shouldn't get down in the weeds. You should know the person to give them the call. You don't want to get that wrong. You don't want to tell them that they're owed this much money and they're not. Now, my favorite story on that was I hired a young teacher in Charlotte, and at the in the first month, she came to me and said, "My check's not right." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "It's not near as much as I thought I was going to get." And I looked at her check. And I said, "Well, you do understand when you were asked if you wanted to be paid in 10 monthly installments or 12, but that wasn't an IQ test. If you got paid in 10, that if you had your check spread out over 12, that it would be less than 10. It's the same amount of money." She did not understand that. That's absolutely the truth. She didn't understand. She thought, yeah, I'd like the same amount in 12 months rather than 10. She thought she was giving herself a 2-month raise. No, if you go on 12 months and have your money spread out, you get less every month. Now, something like that you could explain, but other than that, like steps or experience or my extra degrees, you do not comment on those things. National boards, or I thought I was going to get this much or that much. You need to refer folks to the compensation specialist in your district for that. You do not need to get yourself involved in that discussion. That will not go well for you. So understanding, whatever your hiring practices are, you must follow through. Whatever your compensation benefits packages are, you should be aware of them, but you should refer them to the people, because that's different, again, for every individual person. There is no blanket rule in terms of compensation and benefits. Everybody's a little bit different. Some people buy insurance for their family. Some people are single user. All of those kinds of things. So you got to know what the rules are, and you got to know who to refer people to. Now, my contention is this: if you work in a district where you have to do a lot of the work, especially the interviewing and the reference checks and all of those kind of background, if you have to do that yourself, you have to be careful, because what will happen is eventually you'll get to where, if you're not being cognizant of this, and I'll say I'm guilty of this, you'll start only interviewing the minimum number of people. You won't bring any risky people in, or anybody that looks different, or might be somebody with non-traditional background. You'll start going with the safest people. Maybe not the best person, but if I got to do all this work, I'm not interviewing 10 people. I'm interviewing the minimum 3. And I'm not interviewing anybody that maybe is not from around here, where I've got to try to figure out how to get in touch with their references and those things. They're not easy. And then pretty soon you start staffing your school with the same person, which is not good for your school. You get into this pattern where everybody's pretty much the same. That is, and it is where that really hurts you is in diversity. Really hurts you in diversity, not just racial diversity, but having different people with different perspectives and points of view and different skills and abilities. You start hiring the same person if you're not careful, and that's never good for you or your faculty. It is not good for kids. You need some diversity on your faculty, some people that have different skills and abilities, because everybody's job's not the same. But if you're not careful, because of all the background work that you've got to do, you'll start hiring the same person over and over again. And I'm guilty of that myself. I'm going to stop and pause and catch my breath a minute, and I'm going to have my 2 expert colleagues to weigh in on hiring, what they look for, what the issues are, what the process is for their school and school district. Dr. Holloman, you came in late, so you get to go first.
My camera came on late, but I was here. Let's see. This is the time of the year where I actually had a conversation with my admin team Monday about the pre-planning for hiring for the next school year. Any potential hires that we might need to have, anybody who may have had a conversation with us. We've already talked to our staff about anybody who might not be returning. Anybody who is looking for any kind of a transfer within the district. I've already received several emails from teachers in other schools about if potential openings do occur. they'd like to have a position at the high school where I'm at. You really can't wait until May, June, or July at all anymore. There used to be a lot of opportunities to go to recruitment drives. College universities would do a lot more with hiring fairs. There just aren't as many applicants out there. The well is dry in a lot of areas, especially specialty areas. So build your network and post early. Use social media platforms. Use LinkedIn, Facebook. You can use Twitter, your own website, and then also word of mouth. Let your teachers know that we have positions here that are available. If you know someone who is a quality teacher, educator from another area who's looking for a move, don't feel like you need to wait until you've got that final posting on the website in those 30 days. Sometimes you need to get on it quicker. And I can tell you right now, we used to have, and I'll give you an example, health and PE teacher. There was a day and time when if you posted health and PE or history at the high school level, middle school level, you would probably have 30 applicants for that position easy. Now you're probably going to be lucky if you get 6 or 7. And I mean lucky. You may end up with finding 3 or 4. And maybe of those, one of those actually is already certified. The others are lateral entry, and seeing a lot more lateral entry, a lot more second career teachers coming in, less and less coming from teacher preparation programs. There's a lot less networking there than there used to be. So my advice, and I guess this is the time of the year, is begin to have those conversations early, and begin to almost build your list of people who might be available, even if the position is not open. Make phone calls, introduce yourself, respond in a very open way, very transparent about what you have, and try to make sure you maintain those contacts along the way.
Excellent.
We are in the same boat now as Dr. Holloman's in. This is the time of the year where the transfer window is open in my district. So we have many teachers putting their name on the transfer list. And principals have been prepped to expect this, and we've been told directly in no way, in no way is there to be any type of I don't know, fallback if a teacher puts their name on the list. We have to respect their wishes, and I'm hoping that all principals do. So I have asked all of my staff to complete a form. It's an intent form. Many principals tend to do that, of just letting me know what they intend to do, and it's very simple. Return to my school. Leave my school, but stay in the district. Leave the district, but stay in education. Leave education altogether, or they're not sure, they're looking at options, just so I can kind of gauge where everybody's head's at and what everybody's thinking. I also asked them, if they're considering putting their name on the transfer list, just to give me a heads up, let me know, have the conversation with me. Because at that point, I know that they're willing to stay in the district. So I need to find out, especially if it's one of my top teachers, I need to pull out the bells and whistles to see if I can get them to stay. Because as Dr. Holloman said, a good teacher is a dime a dozen these days. You can't find them. So if there's any way you can keep, you can find out what the problem is and keep your good teachers, that initial conversation you have, asking them, please give me your feedback, please tell me your intentions. That is that initial conversation that may keep a good teacher in your building. As far as the hiring process, as Dr. Lamb said, we're one of those districts that we don't have everything done for us. We have to contact HR about our vacancy. They'll post the position for us. Then everything else is us. We have to monitor AppleTrack, look through all the applicants. Some people, have been career McDonald's employees, and they think they're good in math, so they're they're applying for a math 3 position, you have to go through filter all of that yourself as a principal. So it's good that you have the knowledge and the know-how to sift through everything. Once that's posted, you have to conduct your interviews. As Dr. Lamb said, I've got to do that, and I've got a couple of positions. I can't interview 10, 12 people for one position. I need to sort through to get a variety, but the top applicants. 3 is the minimum. So at least, I might do 4 if there's, the potential for some good people to come to the school, but 3 is the minimum. After that, I have to call the references myself. There's a form that you have to fill out, 6 major questions asking, how well you know them, all the way down to, are you aware of any illegal activity, or are you aware if they've been asked to resign? Would you rehire them? Things like that. You have their standard questions that you have to ask all applicants. At that point, you have to contact HR with your recommendation, and you have to have all 3 of the recommendations in there, in the portal. And then that's when you stop. You wait, you don't do anything else. Then HR steps in, they do the background check on their licensure. They'll contact the person about compensation. We don't do any of that. The next time I step in is when I get a letter, email letter copied saying, welcome, you have been approved, your recommendation has been approved. Then I can, at that point, contact the applicant. So sounds complicated, but once you've done it, it's a pretty much straightforward process. But we do have a process, and we have to follow it exactly in the district.
I'm going to just, I guess, piggyback real quick on something too in our process that we're using. When you're in that moment of hiring, and like Dr. Griffin Jordan was mentioning, you make the reference calls, you make the reference checks. If you have an assistant principal doing it, that's perfectly fine. I mean, I know a lot of larger districts, that's kind of the protocol. But make sure you're talking to the people who are supervising them on a daily basis, not just their friends who work in the department with them, and not just the references that they include. A direct supervisor is required, but that doesn't mean it's just one assistant principal. You can call and talk to another person who is not listed if they list the school. That is available to you, and listen to the answers to the questions that they provide. Sometimes it's the non-answers that are the most important. So when you ask a question like, would you hire this person again? And their answer is, this person is absolutely qualified to be rehired in our district. That is a non-answer. They're available. It doesn't mean that this person might hire them. It just means that they are eligible for rehire or continual employment. So just, make those moments happen. I remember I was on a law conference, and across the screen, the gentleman who was doing the seminar that moment about personnel law had a great long acronym, but ultimately it was best ways to solve your personnel issues. And it was, don't hire the dumb SOB in the first place, was basically the acronym. Because once you hire them, you have that as your problem. Somebody else may have had it before, but once they're with you, it can be a long time for you to deal with those same issues. And the people who don't benefit and are usually hindered by, like Dr. Lamb said, it's all about our kids. So hire somebody who's going to do a really good job working with kids, building relationships, and make sure you're making a good choice from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that your last point there, Dr. Holloman, is most salient. The person may not be my cup of tea, but remember, I'm not going to have to take them home with me every night. They're going to be with our kids every day. We need to make the best choices for our students. What's best for them, not if I like them or if they vibrate sympathetically with me. I need to find the best people for our kids. And we have to keep that perspective in mind as we go through. And so we start out with personnel, and I'm not a big fan of Good to Great, the Collins book that everybody thinks is the greatest book ever. Because Collins's notion is get good people and get them on the bus and get them in the right seat. The problem is what if there aren't good people? That's where his theoretical underpinnings kind of fall short. Is what if there aren't good people? And so the notion here is as you learned in the second half of your course in the fall, you have to develop a professional growth plan. If you don't get good people, as Dr. Hallman said, they're your cross to bear. So you've got to figure out a way to grow them. You can alleviate a lot of your problems by getting don't get the dumb SOB to start with. But if you do get people, even good people have to be grown and developed. And that's what our professional growth plan was last semester. Let's take a regander at mine. This is the one that I would do. I've shown you this one before, and I'll be brief, but this is what mine would look like. Again, I would be grinding on those best practices. I would be grinding on Marzano how to teach, not what to teach, but how to teach. I'd be grinding on those. We'd have a staff development day to kick off the year according to how many folks, as you learned in the APTEL, aren't doing best practices. That's how long the group staff development. But then more importantly, I'd break out into PLC work and work on those individual strategies. And then I would do one-on-one with my new folks. And then by second quarter, I'd be having my low performing folks in there as well, getting some one-on-one mentoring and coaching. But my plan would be to try to improve them as much as I could. But when I got to where I needed to be, middle of the year, and they're not responding, I'd be looking for an action plan. And then I'd be looking at the end of the third quarter at non-renewal. But as Dr. Hallman said, if you pick a dud, the best you can do is get rid of them. You got to keep them a whole year. The best you can do. This is the shortest plan legally available to you as a principal. And if you hire a bad hire, it takes a whole year to get rid of them. Shortest amount of time. Sometimes it bleeds over into a second year. So, do your due diligence and try to find the best people that you can, and understand even if you do get good ones, you still got to grow them. You still got to have that professional growth plan. You can't just hire them and send them down to the room and hope for the best. That's not a plan. That's hope. Hope is not a plan. You must have a plan for them. Try to hire the best ones you can, but still, even then, understand that you've still got to grow them. So that's the hiring piece, and that's the growth piece. And then now let's talk about evaluation. There's two different areas for evaluation. There's the formal evaluation process. I would encourage you during your clinical internship to try to get your district to allow you to go to the training in your district for teacher evaluation. Now, a lot of times districts won't let you go until you get an administrative job, but some districts will, if they've got seats available, will let you get training to do formal teacher observations while you're still a clinical intern in this program. You should talk to your district about that. A lot of times those are held in the summertime coming up, and you'll be finishing this summer, so sometimes they'll let you slip in. And if you can do that, that will be a big bonus for you when you're interviewing for jobs, because one of the problems that we get into as principals when we hire brand new APs that aren't certified to do formal observations in our district, everybody else has to fill in on the team until that person gets their certification to do those evaluations. And now remembering that federal law, EEOC has laws, and then state has law in terms of how you have to treat employees in terms of their formal evaluations. According to what year they are and what level of certification they have and advanced degrees, everybody has so many formal observations. It's not the same for every one of your faculty members. We're going to have our experts tell us about that in just a second. But the notion here is ever how many formal observations that is, you have to divide those up among your administrative team. And you can imagine if one of your team can't do them, that puts an undue burden on everybody else. So if you can get your your formal training for your district to do formal observations, that would be a feather in your cap, and that would get you off and running and make everybody on the administrative team feel better about you. That you don't have to wait weeks or months, and everybody else has to pick up your slack on doing those evaluations. Those evaluations are a contract. You cannot skip them. You must make sure that you do those evaluations in the cycle that they're supposed to be done. Now, obviously, I've got the evaluation manual pulled up here. Let me switch over to this one. Yeah, that's the teacher evaluation manual. Teachers are evaluated on professional teaching standards. Standard 1, demonstrate leadership. That's classroom leadership. We talked about that. That's Marzano. School-wide leadership. That's Whitaker. You recognize this from your APTEL last semester. You can see very clearly that everything that we do follows right along with this. Teaches and establish a respectful environment for diverse populations of students. We've worked on that this semester with our special populations. That's why we had you do the audit in task 1 of the OMA, so that you would understand that there's diversity. It's not just racial diversity. There's diversity in learning, and there's diversity in different identified groups. And so you have to, standard 3, teachers know the content they teach. Standard 4, teachers facilitate learning for their students. And 5, teachers reflect on their practice. That's a lot of PLC work. And so standard 6, teachers contribute to the academic success of students. That's basically EVOS. That's growth is where that one kind of fits in. And so we have this formal evaluation system, and I'm going to go to our 2 experts. Dr. Griffin Jordan gets to go first this time to explain to you the number of formal observations, not walkthroughs, but formal observations. And I'd like for her to also speak to the policy in her district on walkthroughs.
Okay, so for our observations or formal evaluations, depending on your level, meaning how long you've been in the district, how long you've been teaching and whatnot, we have abbreviated. These are our more seasoned teachers. You have to do 2, only 2 mandatory, and they can be 20-minute snapshots. They're only evaluated on standards 1 and 4. So they're leadership and facilitating learning for the student. Because they are veterans, or they're supposed to be the highest qualified because they're abbreviated, it is assumed that they are advanced or accomplished or distinguished in the other areas already. So the 2 that they're evaluated on are 1 and 4. Then you have the standard. That's where most of our teachers fall. They have 3 observations that you get to evaluate during the year, at least 3. You can always do more in every cycle. That's the minimum. You can always do more than the minimum. They're evaluated on all standards. And then you have a comprehensive. That is your newer teachers, some of your BT teachers, the ones that have not been in the district long. They've only been teaching for a few years. They're still going through the BT program, maybe still in finishing up their teaching licensure program to be fully licensed. They are all under the comprehensive wing. They also have to have a peer evaluator. As Dr. Lamb was mentioning, please don't wait until you're in the position. Teachers can be peer observers. So there are certain teacher leaders in my school that I know desire to one day, or they may already be in school, to be an administrator. I make sure that if possible, I can assign them as a peer observer. the rating is the same. They get to go in and, they're not doing the official one that I do, but they get to go through the motions and sit and talk with their coworker about the observation that they just gave. So that is something that I always do for my teacher leaders. And then what was the other thing that you wanted me to talk about?
You mentioned the 20-minute ones, yeah, but that's it. And then some districts do just some informal 15-minute walkthroughs as well.
Yes. Yeah, we have actually it's a Google form, but we have it on our phone where we can go in really quick and we can check off and then make comments like, was the essential question either posted, discussed on their Canvas site? Were the students interacting? What type of lesson was going on? And we can kind of check, okay, guided practice, independent practice, group discussion, just whatever is going on. And we can just kind of go through really quickly and then give feedback at the end. And once we hit submit, it goes directly to the teacher as we're walking out the room. That is very efficient as opposed to observing and then having to remember and go back to my office and type up something to send. And they're usually like 5-minute walkthroughs.
And so the notion here is those 5 to 15 minutes, they can't go more than 15 minutes when it becomes a formal. Those 5 to 15 are very, very useful in knowing what's going on and keeping up and not having to stay a whole hour or 90 minutes or whatever. That's a different thing though. That's to keep you in touch with teachers. The formal observation system is mandated by state law. You cannot deviate from that. And so one of the issues is students at this level think, well, I'll just do walkthroughs on there. No, you don't have that option. Those 5 to 15-minute snapshots are just basically to keep teachers knowing that you care about them and that you're interested in what they're doing. It's more of a leadership function than an evaluative function. So don't get that part twisted. That's just, hey, I care about you and what you're doing. And that's a big part of leadership, but don't confuse that with formal observation. It's not. Dr. Holloman?
A couple things, just I guess to make sure that to follow up on what Dr. Griffin Jordan was mentioning too. The evaluation process is in place to provide formal documentation throughout the course of a year for each teacher, depending upon where their level of professional license is. So beginning teachers and teachers who are new to your district, I think the first 3 years, they've got to have those 3 formal observations by an administrator, 45 minutes, and 1 peer. But the goal there is to document throughout the year, hopefully, like Dr. Lamb was mentioning before, that their PDP is in place, that their growth is occurring, that you see evidence of that through not just one lens, but multiple lenses, so that when the summative occurs, you can use those observations and say, I see what you've done, bring evidences to me along the way of showing me that these things are in place for the standards that we're observing. So then the summative is reflective of the observations along with other things you might see, because really, standard 1, you don't look for everything in the observation. Standard 5, you don't look for any of that in the observation. There are other pieces there you might see, but maybe in a classroom, you're not looking for it, but you do see it in their interactions with students. So the observations are one piece of your formal documentation process. Also, they've made a few changes along the way regarding, the number of observations. Veteran teachers and abbreviated are now the same thing. Before you had to be tenured to be abbreviated. Now all of those in standard form are basically veteran teachers because they're on contracts. We use those formal observations in conjunction with the walkthroughs. At the same time, I will go ahead and tell you there are moments when you may have a teacher who needs to have one more added. I watched and saw something in September. I saw it again in October or in December. And now I'm going to do a third formal observation, even though it's not required. I'm going to add that. You can do that as a principal or assistant principal anytime you need to. It is not punitive. It is simply one more point of reference for the summative. And then for all of those who are on the renewal cycle, you've also got to remember in your process that they need 3 formal observations during that year. And if you don't do that, then their renewal can be in place as a concern. So there are things like that that kind of just come up, and you honestly, your HR folks should direct you through a lot of it. They should provide training throughout the year. But if you don't know, ask questions, call DPI, run through all the NESIS webinars that they have and all the other pieces that are there. It's really just about making sure that along the way, you're not waiting until April to do 3 observations for a beginning teacher. Set yourself a nice schedule, make sure everybody's on the same page, get them done early. Summatives usually, for me, by the time I'm hitting March, April, I'm doing summatives for the veteran teachers, and the beginning teachers are done by, I think, usually the beginning of May for all of ours. And that you're wrapped up and you've used it cumulatively throughout the year, kind of like you do budgeting. Don't spend all your money the last 3 months of the year. It doesn't impact instruction that way. Observations are the same. Do them early. It impacts instruction better as you get those done on the early side.
Absolutely.
And I want to just add, with the observations, you can't have the observation, leave, and then 2 months later say, okay, I need for you to come in and check off on our post-observation conference. You have a small window of 10 days in our district that you have to have your post-observation conference. And we try not to wait 10 days. If you have important feedback for your teachers as soon as possible, if not the next day, the following day, you need to get them in so that it's fresh on their mind what they did, and they're not trying to remember 2-3 weeks later what happened in the and you're dinging them on something and they're like, well, no, I don't remember doing that. So just make sure when you go in and you schedule them that you have a time set on the backside to go back to them and meet with them for their post-observation conference so they can sign off.
Yep. Full disclosure, I had over 200 teachers my last year as a high school principal. I had 6 APs, but we had over 700 observations to do. You got to get on it early. You got to get on it often. You can't wait. You got to get after it. Even if you're not in that, even if you're not in a numbers crunch, my point is even if you're not in a numbers crunch, it doesn't do any good to let them know in April that they're not doing well. They need to know in September. That's why I said by the end of the first quarter, let me go back to that again. By the end of the first quarter, you've got to have identified by the end of the first quarter you have got to have identified teachers that are going to need assistance by the end of the first quarter. That means you've got to be in the rooms doing those formal observations during that first quarter. That's the most important time. You can't wait. You can't wait till April and start worried about instructional improvement, just like you can't wait till the end of the year and spend up all your money. It has no impact then. So that's the notion here, is you got to get after it early and often.
And a quarter for most schools on the 10-month calendar is not 3 months. It's 9 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're dividing it up, don't think it's 3 months, because at that point in time, you're in November, Thanksgiving's already passed, and you're close to Christmas. Hey, Dr. Lamb, real quick, and it was harder at the end to do these observations because you had to actually do it on a stone and chisel, right?
Yeah,
We've got nothing to complain about. We could just do it all right there on the computer.
Yeah. We rode to work in the Fred Flintstone mobile and did them on a stone tablet. That's exactly right. That's exactly how I did my work. But it's still the same process. I mean, the technology is much better today, but the whole notion is if you want instructional improvement, you can't wait till the end of the year to get it. That's the idea here. You got to be on it. Again, you may not get the best ones. You're probably not going to get the best ones. You just hope you get some good ones, but you got to try to make them the best ones. That's your job. That's the notion here. And to go back to where we were, and that's why I had left that up on the screen, as both of our experts alluded to, formal observations on standards 1 through 4, 5 is EBOS. The work of the teacher results in acceptable, measurable progress for students. Everybody understands that's the growth model, EVOS. Now, hopefully you attended my session last semester on the Thursday night when we did, when our 601 team did EVOS. You had Dr. Hamilton and Dr. Crawford, Dr. Revis, and Dr. Stedman, who went through that, and Drs. Crawford and Hamilton are sitting principals that are experts in EVOS, and they went through that with you to explain growth. And I spent some time explaining the actual calculus of the model to you, and I'm going to go over that in 1 second, just as a point of, for those of you who might have come across Dr. Crawford. His school was recognized as having the most growth, 3.5, in the entire Triad area, which is Greensboro, High Point, and Winston-Salem. He's getting an award early next month for his school. They made tremendous growth. Now, remember, he's at a Title I school in High Point, but he made growth. And so the notion here is, congratulations to Dr. Jamal Crawford, but also the notion here is to remember that a lot of times what you're going to get from your teachers is, well, I don't have the right kids to make growth. The whole notion of the EVOS model is that everybody has the same opportunity to make growth with students, because the growth score for a child is individual to that child. It's not some theoretical score that this child must make. It's not comparative accountability, it's growth. So every child has a score. If that child makes that score, they've made growth. And the metrics are, for a teacher to have made growth or met, 85% of her kids in her room or his room must have met growth. And for a school to meet growth, it's 85% of the teachers to do that. Now, there's a new calculation that came out from DPI this past week. We're digging into it right now, but I don't think it fundamentally changes things. But everybody understands, you either not met or exceeded growth. But that's about what individual kids do, and that's what standard 6 is here. And so that's the notion. So let's look at that again. I'll pull this back up again quickly. I know I went over it last semester with you, but some of you may not have seen it, or if you did, you may not remember it. Remembering that that for 20 years, it's now over 30, but at the 20-year mark, all the testing data from North Carolina and South Carolina was dumped by SAS Institute right outside Raleigh, the Research Triangle, was dumped into a big database. And analysis of variance was done to find out what were the independent variables that had that in terms of what affected a child's test score, how much variance of each one did each one of those account for. And 10 were identified. And then a regression equation can be made, pretty simple. And so when you add all those together, you get all the variance in a kid's test score. So again, it's a point or two either way, but here are the 10 independent variables that affect the dependent variable. And so race is 30%, mother's education 15, father's income 15, teacher 10. Teacher's only 10% of a child's grade, but everything else is controlled for. So we know if a child makes growth, it's because of the teacher, not because of other factors. We control for all these others. The school district is 5, school 5, grade 5, age 5, gender 5, previous test scores 5. And so this is what it looks like. Third grade math EOG has 180 questions. So the total raw score that any school could achieve would be 180. The question is, what score out of 180 would represent a year's growth? Well, we can't just say that 120 or 15. It's in how much would show growth for a particular child. It's not a group aggregate kind of thing. It's that child has his own projected or her own projected growth score. So here's how it would go. This is an actual child. Jamar's third grade student, Charlotte Mecklenburg. His independent variables are, that should be independent. Independent variables are, he's black, that's 20 out of 30. White would be 30 out of 30. Hispanic would be 15 out of 30. Now that's not racist. That's just how the variance works. That's historical test score data. Mother less than a high school diploma, 5 out of 15 possible points. Beyond a 4-year degree would be 15. No father in home, 0 out of 15. Father's income in excess of 150 would be 15. Why is that? Because if dad makes enough money, mama gets to stay at home. Where do kids learn? Lap time from mom. Everybody understands that. Teacher, we all assumed is 10. CMS is a high wealth district. A low wealth district would be 2. Billingsville was a takeover school, so 0. If it had been a high growth school, it'd be 5. Grade 5, he's not a repeater, so he gets 5 points. He only gets 3 on his age because he didn't start school until he was 6, because he was developmentally delayed. He gets 3 out of 5. His gender is 5. It's a math test. Female would be 4. Be the opposite way if it would be males get 4 on a reading test. And females get 5 on the reading test. So it would be the opposite. So the female would get 4 on the math test, you'd get 5 on the reading, and vice versa. The male would get 4. Previous scores not on grade level according to his M class or double data coming out of 2nd grade. So his equation looks like this: 20 plus 5 plus 0 plus 10 plus 5 plus 0 plus 5 plus 3 plus 5 plus 2 equals 55%. So out of a possible raw score of 180, he's got to get 55% of the questions right. So he's got to get 99. He's got to get 99 out of 100. If he gets 99 out of 180 questions right, he's made a year's grade. So as you can see, and we went over this as you can see, the notion here is that you got to find the right teachers with the right kinds of kids. But there's this notion that certain kids are easier to get growth than others. That's not true, because it's all controlled for. The only variable in here is that varies actually is the teacher. And if the teacher doesn't add value, 10 points, at least 7 or 8 points of value, the kid won't show growth. So this isolates a teacher's value, and that's that other part of the evaluation. You have the formal evaluation system, but then you have growth that you have to look at your school. All right, experts, take it away in any order that you want to go. Talk about EVOS at your school.
Well, I guess it's going to be different for us to a degree at high school than it would be for elementary school to middle school. And let me explain why. And Dr. Griffin Jordan, I'm sure with your school, you'll be the same thing. We don't get to compare apples to apples sometimes or at all when it comes to EOCs. You can compare a 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade reading score. And a 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade math score, because you do get to see math growth based on a grade level of curriculum. Our Math 1 score is based on the 8th grade EOG and 7th grade EOG, but we also have English 2 and we have biology. And neither of those have a course prior to it that actually is apples to apples comparison. English 2 is based off of middle school EOG scores, and then biology is based off of, oddly enough, a math score and an EOG score in middle school. And so it depends on where the student was at that time, how you track it. And for us, for EVOS, right now, our EVOS data is almost non-existent as far as something helpful, because those students, they had no EOG in 2020. They had virtual learning in 2021. So all of our students that we have right now for Math 1, English 2, and biology, we don't actually have any true credible EVOS data to go off of. So this year we started with our own, similar to you all do the BOG, that beginning of grade test. We actually did a BOG for each of our courses, Math 1, English 2, and biology, to see what basic skills they had as related to released EOCs that we had access to. We gave them one beginning of the school year, scored that on our own, got a raw score out of it to determine where our gaps might be. Things like that, just different. And you all are doing the same thing in elementary school and middle school. There are 2 years of no data for EVOS right now as you're trying to compare something. And SAS will tell you that they have this wonderful reverse algorithm where they're going to be able to calculate a student's lack of growth based off of virtual learning. I love people who have confidence, but
Yeah.
it sounds more like hogwash than anything else. That for us right now, we're trying to do the best we can with our kids, cover our content, see if we can track our own growth based on our own preliminary assessments and our interim assessments that we're doing, and then hope that at the end of the year, end of the semesters, that we're somewhat in line with where we would like to be, and use this year as a baseline again.
Yeah. Now, before I'll interrupt Dr. Griffin Jordan before we go any further. That's what I was referring to before. There was a link that came out, I think either Wednesday or Thursday of last week, where they're going to try to make up for that missing data in the EVOS calculation. Now, y'all don't know what I do in my other role at Gardner Webb. I teach statistics. Parametric statistics, calculus, methodology. I know I don't look like it. I'll be the first to admit, but this is the kind of thing that I teach doctoral students on a regular basis. I have weekend classes for doctoral students, and I teach this. And that's why I said we're still trying to break it down. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. But after a preliminary read and discussion of it, I'm skeptical, to say the least. I understand this. This is based on calculus. This is based on doing an analysis of variance. This is pretty simple stuff here. But this reverse engineered it's actually a regression equation in reverse that they're trying to do to pert it out. I'm not sure about that. But the bigger notion here is, we've got to be concerned with student performance. That's got to be a part of teacher evaluation. And however you do it, whether EVOS gets its act together and gets cleaned up, or whether you do pre and post test, like Dr. Holman was talking about. The point here is you are required, and it's absolutely necessary if you're going to serve kids well. That part of teacher evaluation has to be the student performance. We cannot discount that. Effort is important, but outcomes are what matter. You got to always remember that. Effort's important. Just because you're pitching doesn't mean they're catching, though. Insert metaphor here. You got to make sure that however you do it, that student outcomes, student achievement has to be the heart of what you do. Back to you, Dr. Griffin Jordan.
Mr. Holloman said it all with the EVOS. We're in the same boat. We had COVID, and then so we didn't have anything. And then last year we came back. Districts did different things. Our district decided to get students in to test. Students were given a certain grade just to come in to test. So they were given a certain grade on their final, for their 20% final exam grade. That was met with some encouraging words, and then some kind of non-encouraging words, because we did have students, not just in my school, but across the district, that came in and A, B, C, D, and they got a 90 for their final exam grade. So we know that those scores are not reflective of the student's true knowledge. So that's 2 years that we're having to consider when you're looking at our scores now, when we're going through this year. So we're hoping to, again, like Holloman said, to have a baseline this year. You've had a full year in, and start over again with the EVOS. In the meantime, the district has really pushed forward with Case 21 benchmarks, and we do those on a quarterly basis, and we compare and we look at the data. Case 21 or Mastery Connect it can be very detailed. Going by standard, you can pull up by student, by standard, if they've mastered a specific standard based on their answer, or if they need remediation. That's what we're going through to monitor our teachers, I guess our students' progress and our teachers' ability to teach those specific standards. So until EVOS gets back up, we're relying on case 21 benchmarks.
Very good. Well, thank you both for that. I've got a PowerPoint that's just some general ideas, but this is the piece that I wanted to kind of to summarize teacher evaluation tonight and human resources. Human resources administration is possibly the most important function in education. It is for administrators. I mean, you know, you don't teach a soul, but you hire and supervise and try to improve the people who do. And so there's no more important function in the school business than personnel. And you got to understand that. You can't just rush through it. You can't just take whoever shows up so you won't have to do any work on the hiring end. You can't wait till the end of the year and rush and do a few walkthroughs and not work on instructional improvement. You can't not look at student performance data and just say, well, you know, they had a good lesson plan. It was on their desk. You know, you've got to do the work on personnel. You've got to do the work. If you don't, your school won't be successful. As a reminder, this is from the Principal Assistant Principal Evaluation Manual. You see all these terms here of the things that you've been exposed to in this program. Just kind of on the way out, you will be expected to produce evidence, a written narrative of what you've done. That's part of your evaluation system. And you will be expected to produce artifacts, just like you do in this program. We monitor the principal evaluation system in North and South Carolina. And even in the handbook, they have, just like I have outlined for you what your artifacts are that you will put into your competency folio later this semester. They've done the same thing here. Artifact is not something, let's read what an artifact is. An artifact is not something that is just been made for evaluation purposes. An artifact is the byproduct of the work that you do in school. And so let me find that here. I had it pulled up, and evidence is a written document that tells what you did. An artifact is a product resulting from assistant principal's work. They're natural byproducts of work and are not created for the purpose of evaluation. And so they even tell you, like I tell you what your artifacts are, they do that in the principal evaluation manual at the end of each standard. It has practices, and it has what artifacts are approved that you should have to show that you did what you did. So as an extension of teacher evaluation, you will be evaluated too. And part of that is, do you evaluate your teachers? You'll have to show evidence of that you'll have to write up, I evaluated this many teachers, and then you'll have the artifacts, which are those documents, those actual, the documented proof of those evaluation systems where you were in the student's room, but more importantly, the documentation from those post conferences that you did with teachers, and they'll be checking those dates to make sure you didn't wait months. You did an observation in September, but you didn't get around to the post conference till the end of April, when it got to be the end of the year. Well, how do you get any improvement if you did that? And so, as a part of the evidence artifacts, a big part of that piece will be personnel. So understand that this is, but also understand, if you don't like evidence artifacts, you're in the wrong business, because that's how you're going to be evaluated when you become a principal and assistant principal. A couple of housekeeping items right here at the end. Under Zoom session 2, I have the assessment inventory checklist. That's one of the things that you're supposed to be doing this week. If your district does not have that, that twice monthly building check that you have to do, that's required by state law. If your district doesn't have one, you can borrow mine. This is what it looks like. Let me pull it up. This is what it looks like. It has all these different areas on it. So it's under Zoom session 2 if you need to use that. Now, my response back is remembering you got to do this twice a month. It's, that if you're the new AP on the block, it'll be your job. You and the custodian will have to do it. But here's the piece that, I know this sounds dumb, and me, I never say dumb things. Here's the part of this that I, when I was in the central office and I was supervising the schools, I had this to happen. There was a small fire at a school in a little outbuilding. And, I showed up at the school, I was there with the principal and, and I said, well, I'll need to see your assessment, your inventories, and make sure that, this problem, that you had, made sure that it was clear and that everything was good in this building. And she had the documentation where she had done it, but she had documented that there was a problem. And I said, she said, well, I did my part. I documented that there was a problem out here, with this building with some chemicals and some other things that shouldn't have been stored out here. I said, but if you documented it, that means that you should have followed through and tried to get it fixed. Well, no, that wasn't my job. I just had to document. And so my response to your assessment inventory is this: if you document these things and you don't take any steps to ameliorate them or to fix them, when you go to court, and you will, they'll get you for nonfeasance, for negligence. So the notion isn't just that we document issues on our campus, that we take steps to fix them. I know that sounds dumb, but you'd be amazed at how many people think, well, all the law says is I just have to document. No, that's not what the law says. You document them, but you fix them, or you call the people in your district to fix them. Just like something as innocuous as fire extinguishers being, the date them expiring. After a year, they expire. Well, they send somebody out to check on those. Did you check them? Well, no. Do you know if they checked them? Well, no. What if they're expired? Well, that's their problem. No, it's not their problem. Because you've got people that help you with things that you can call to help fix problems does not absolve you of the responsibility to make them get fixed, is my point. It's just like we talked about fundraising. You can delegate that to the PTA, but you still have to keep up with that money, and they still have to document it, and they still has to go to your school budget. And you still have to receipt it. It's still the same procedures. You can document the activity, but not the responsibility. It's the same way with your facilities. Even though you've got maintenance people and you've got people in facilities and all, it doesn't matter. It comes back to you if it doesn't get fixed and it becomes a problem. Please remember that, and you can use mine if you don't use yours. You don't have one for your district. I see our time is up. Final thoughts, principal experts, on human resources. I gave mine. It's possibly the most important part of the school business from an administrative perspective in terms of from operations. What you got to do every day is make sure you hire good people, supervise them, and help grow them, and then adequately evaluate them. So that's my takeaway from human resources. I'll give each of you in turn your final thoughts on human resources.
I would say, okay. I would say get involved as much as you can, even before you become administrator. Ask to be a peer observer, ask to sit in on the interviews. Me as a principal, I allow staff members, like if we're hiring for a new counselor, I'll allow the department people to come in, and my leadership team to come in. If a teacher asks specifically to sit in, I never turn a teacher away from sitting in on an interview. Ask to be a part of the process for as much as you can. Ask the questions so that you won't be overwhelmed when you do step in the position.
I think something else, when you're hiring, Dr. Lamb mentioned this before, you look for diversity, you look for people who are different than you. You also need to have a vision for the school, look at the school improvement plan, look at the staff that you have, see if there are any gaps. You ever heard the phrase, 20% of the people do 80% of the work? You're always trying to move that needle a little bit. So who can you hire who is a doer? and people who on their resume or in their conversation talk about other interests, other activities, things that they are involved with. Maybe they can bring something new to the school that you don't currently have. Maybe they can change the culture because they add a club or an activity or an after school program, whatever it might be. And so it's not just the core content, it's also the other things that person brings to the table. And I think sometimes those are the conversations you have in the interview that are beyond just the reference calls and the questions that you might normally ask about their classroom, their teaching, their instructional side. What else can they bring to the table and hopefully make it a better place for students to learn?
Absolutely. That's a great point. Again, all of you, thank you for joining us tonight. We have our we have our next case study. I believe that's Jimmy and Willie next week. I look forward to your presentations. Everybody have a good week. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Have a great week, everybody.
Bye-bye.